It was on this day, April 29th, 2025, that I finished The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. We're going to jump right into non-spoilers before we get into spoilers and what's new and what's next. Non-spoilers, this book is not what I expected. I didn't have any particular expectations. I usually try to go into books as blind to them as I can, and I didn't know anything about this series prior to picking it up, other than that people said it was a character-driven series, and that's all I knew. And I knew that it made people cry. No context as to why. I just knew people cried reading this. So maybe not this particular book, but Robin Hobb's works. So that's all I knew coming into this book. The point of view / narration, not at all what I expected. I thought that this was going to be standard fantasy, I'll be honest. My mental image of standard fantasy was just kind of like Codex Alera to me in my brain, of like you start with the character and the first person narration, you're going through it. But no, this is not. It is first person narration, but it's not. It's not in the moment. It's reflective narration. The only other book I can think of that was written like this was Ender's Game. And Ender's Game wasn't fully like this either. But I feel there's a few parallels between this book and Ender's Game. So I think that is very interesting. The way that things are revealed, the way that there's surprises, and you're not quite sure what direction something will go because there will be curveballs. This was full of curveballs all the time. And I could not predict what was going to happen. Like, sometimes there were huge aha moments where I was like, I called it. I guess aha and I called it are two separate moments, but I've had both of those. But at the same time, there was also so many times that it went a completely different route than I expected. I could not have seen what ended up happening coming. And so I really loved that. This book was really good at catching me off guard, but then also using dramatic irony when relevant, where I knew something the characters didn't, and I was like, I called it, when the character finally figures it out. So a lot of great usage of those things. In general, this book is very mysterious, and I really, really enjoyed that. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head where you're really learning it as you go like this. Mistborn like explains it to you, like other series explain the magic to you. This, you got to figure it out. It's not very much taught. You kind of got to put the pieces together. So I really appreciate that as well about this book. It's very mysterious, and I like me a good mystery book, and so I'm kind of treating it like a mystery book where I'm trying to solve the pieces and put them together. I do agree with what I heard about the series as character driven. Most of my love moments are all revolved around characters. There's a lot of things I like too. I think the magic's fascinating, but the characters, they're really well written, and I can't even explain what it is about them, but they feel like genuine people. I think they have a depth to them, they have characterization, they have different moods, and you see them in the different moods. They talk differently depending on circumstances. They're very definitive people, and I think they sound really real. There's a lot of, this is another point I was going to make, but there's a lot of parallels to some parts of my life in this book, and I think it's easy to see them as real characters because you can relate to some of the experiences, or you can relate it to someone else you've seen that acts that way. So that also really got me drawn in on the characters, I think, is that they felt like real people because it was very based in reality in many ways, I would argue. Some people probably disagree. Those are most of my non-spoiler comments. I did cry at the end. I cried on the last page before the epilogue. I'm sure many others didn't. I was hit hard by that line. That line, its delivery was so good. So I cried. And yeah, I love the main character, and I loved one of the side characters. so much. So much. I loved the side character. The most. Without a doubt. He really grew on me. So I'll talk about that more in spoilers. Most of the spoilers is actually going to be about that character. So leave now if you don't want spoilers for Assassin's Apprentice. Drink water as per tradition. Please hydrate. Hydrate's good for you. Hydrating is good for you. I'm really bad at English, sorry. Alright, spoilers. Little bit lost at the beginning of the book. Didn't quite know what was going on. He gets dropped off at this, like, place. That's kind of like lodge, I guess. And you're trying to figure out, like, where is he? What is he doing? It turns out he's a bastard. Main theme of the book. A lot of that. And he gets sent off, and he starts to get used by King Shrewd. And that's when you start realizing, oh shit, there's stuff afoot. And so he stays with Burrage. And at first, I was unsure about Burrage. I thought Burrage was maybe going to be rude or very bad, but Burrage ends up raising him as a stable boy. And it's going great and interestingly. And you start to notice very gradually that he keeps describing things related to the animals in first person. You start to notice that he talks about the sense of smell he has of everything, and the dog's sense of smell. And I remember thinking to myself, is this like a typo, like a confused thing? It is not. I think like the third time I was like, oh, this is like he's doing something to cause this. And Burrage finds out, and Burrage, my man, that I hate sometimes, don't get me wrong, hold on, we'll get there. Burrage finds out, and he's like, don't do it. And so then there's this suspense for a few chapters of Fitz, the main character, not doing it, but at the same time the lingering possibility is there, and the thought of him being caught by Burrage is there, and he keeps doing it every once in a while, especially Nosy, the dog, and Nosy and him are like inseparable. And then there's this scene, I don't remember much of the early book except for the Burrage moments. There's a scene where Burrage catches the two of them. Burrage catches the two of them being very similar, and so he gets the whip, the crop out, which apparently he's never used on an animal before, which just adds even more to the scene, because you're like, oh, this is icky, and then you find out that he's such a nice man that he wouldn't do that, and he gets out the crop, and the dog flinches, and he's like, y'all are connected. Get out of here. And you think Nosy died. That's the crazy part, is I 100% thought that he killed Nosy, and I didn't forgive him for quite a while after that. Turns out, at the end of the book, or towards the very end of the book, Nosy did not die. He just sent Nosy away, which again brought him back into my good graces. There's a whole lot more. Anyway, sends Nosy away. Fitz, main character, pretty much goes into depression. Chade is gone. Nosy supposedly died, he thinks. And Fitz is just going through a time, and I felt so bad for Fitz, and I really wanted Chade to show up. I really wanted, like, anything to help Fitz, honestly. And so I was like, oh, Burrage, why'd you do this to my boy? And Burrage was kind of being, like, rude and, like, sassy, and assigning him with animals he can't talk to or whatnot. And so, you know, he's not doing great. Eventually, I think patience happens before Galen, right? Patience happens before Galen. Patience shows up. Whole thing. Patience actually shows up after his first assassination. Oh my god, okay, hold on. We should probably talk about all the things. First assassination mission. I fucking knew that Lady Time was Chade. I knew it. The second the palanquin, whatever you say it, showed up, I knew that was Chade, and I fucking called it. I'm just saying, I knew it. I knew it in my soul. So anyway, Chade was on the mission to see how he does, and I was very interested. The Fool, fascinating. The Fool, like, predicting things, fascinating. Everyone else's reaction to Fitz talking to the fool often, fascinating. So the fool saying "fat suffices," which is the name of the chapter, and I remember it because again, this is such like a, it's like a niche thing to remember, but the way it was written, the way it was written makes it super memorable. Fat suffices. He has the dog bone and he like puts the fat in, and he has a hook, puts the fat in, takes it out of the poor dog's mouth, which by the way also knew that that was her before Fitz figured it out, because there was a dog, a small yappy dog, and I remembered one woman with a small yappy dog. I don't remember the character's name, but the girl that really needed assistance, let's be honest. Um, he solved the problem with that coincidentally, but then at the exact same time, bam, forging happens. So Chade and Fitz have to go forge, and he didn't really do his first assassination. And that whole sequence where they make it to forge, I really thought it would go a different route. I thought Chade would know what Fitz is talking about. Chade didn't understand, and Fitz couldn't explain it. So I really thought at some point in the book that Fitz would explain it, to his detriment or not. You know, that's one of the big things in this book, is usually when he explains something it's to his detriment, which is so relatable. I remember so many times feeling that in my teenage years. I had that with a lot of different things. That was a very real thing. So all those moments were really like, I wanted him to tell them for the entertainment, for like the sake of reading, the suspense of it. But at the same time, I didn't want him to tell them because I didn't want him to get in trouble. And so I felt that dichotomy throughout this whole book, and that's part of why I enjoyed it so much. Is that there was just this conflict of I want them to know, but I don't want them to know at the exact same time. But never told Chade. And so they had to figure out their way home and explain that these forged people, which, by the way, what the fuck is up with forging? I still don't know how that works, what is happening. Who knows? I thought it'd have to do with the skill. Seems like no. Something's going on there. But yeah, he keeps it secret and he goes home, and then Patience shows up, and Patience gives him a dog. Patience gives him a dog, and he has to keep the dog secret. Huge moment. He's trying to keep the dog secret from Burrich because he's starting to use his power that Burrich didn't approve of again. And then Patience convinces the king and whatnot to teach Fitz the skill. And that was a sequence. That was, in fact, a sequence. Without getting too much into personal detail, some of that was very, very familiar. So this book, by default, over other books, has bonus points because of a relatability factor on something really shitty. It portrayed something that happened in my life in some pretty accurate detail, and it didn't feel it was just there just for something shitty, which I've noticed a lot in other fantasy series, particularly series I don't like, is an author writes something really bad happening that doesn't seem to be a justification why, or like a purpose, or etc., etc. Technically authors have free will, right? But the way Robin Hobb did it 100% was full of points and conflicts and repercussions and just accuracy to how people are and the way people think. So I have to say about the whole Galen sequence, wow. I spoiled my roommates about it because I needed to rant to someone about it, about how much it was reminding me of certain things. So that was a sequence. We're not going to go any deeper than that. We're just going to say that was crazy. Moving on. he fails Galen's test. I really didn't know what was going to happen with that. I didn't know if he was going to prove Galen wrong. He went into Galen's mind, and I was like, but he fails Galen's test, and he's just out, right? And then he realizes after, with other people's help, that he is traumatized. He was thoroughly traumatized on purpose. And so there's a whole sequence of him pretty much like not even working through his trauma, but just struggling to recognize his trauma. He doesn't accept his trauma, even as Burrage is telling him that there's other things to do and that he could still do things. Verity is the one who says that he can still use the skill, and it doesn't even occur to him because he's been traumatized and manipulated. So that is a whole sequence as well. There's a lot going on there. I think his first kill is technically the Forged, which wasn't a big deal. I really wondered if it was going to make a big deal, if the book was going to make a big deal about his first kill, but it wasn't. And I kind of like that. I feel most assassin stories, or just stories in general, focus on like, oh no, they killed someone for the first time, which is a big deal to many, but I think it wouldn't have really fit in the context of this book. And I think it makes a lot of sense that he just goes on to narrate, yeah, I killed a lot more times after that. he just goes on to say that. And it's both because it's reflection. It makes sense that he would say that in a reflection, but it also makes sense that Fitz probably wouldn't have cared much at the time. And I think that's very real. Also, can we just talk about how common it is in human history and in entertainment media for a spy or assassin to be raised from childhood? Big theme. Oh my god, we skipped one of my favorite sequences. One of my favorite sequences is when Chade tells Fitz to go steal from the king. That was so good. I can't even explain to you. Like, I predicted most of it, but it didn't matter that I predicted it. I was still 100% invested. I was so invested for that sequence. And that was just real, of like testing whether or not he would serve the king, and him having a mental breakdown about it because he really wanted to be an assassin, but he also had his personal ethics. He was fighting his personal ethics. That was so real, and it was so good. There's a lot of themes that relate to real life regarding that, but it also was just entertaining. Fitz was just going through so much. That was also a period of depression for him. He didn't really have a good time, let's be honest. Also, Burrage seeing him beaten up after Galen beat him up, and then Burrage just dragging him to the fucking scene stones. I fucking love Burrage. I love Burrage, and I enjoy Chade. I can't say I love Chade because we kind of didn't see him that much in the grand scheme of things, but I fucking love Burrage. Anyway, skip back to the future. Galen, trauma, dog, patience, recovering from trauma. So when Fitz was out on Galen's mission, the reason he lost was because Burrage was stabbed, and Fitz could feel that through the dog, which he's not supposed to do. He's not supposed to do. And he shows up, and Burrage has been stabbed, and he's trying to care for Burrage, and Burrage is like, you knew through the dog, didn't you? And Fitz was like, yes, but you were hurt. I wanted to help you. And he's like, we aren't friends. And I was devastated. I was so devastated. I really, really wanted Burrage and Fitz to get along, and I kept hoping it would happen, and it didn't happen. And so then I kept going through the book, and then he got this new assignment where he has to go to the Jor of the nation and talk to the Jor of the people, and I was like, I miss Burrage and Chade. And those were all the people I didn't get to see until Burrage was on the mission, but Burrage was still being cold to Fitz, and so I was like, oh. And so then I kind of paused reading for a little bit, because I had schoolwork too, but I was like, and we get to the kingdom, and there's all these things happening, and he's supposed to kill this person, but turns out person's in perfect health. Someone's lying. Who's lying? And so then it becomes a mystery. I like me a mystery. So I started trying to figure it out. And there was the four-way poison thing going on. Crazy, by the way. There just kept being a new layer to what was going on. So it felt like a Sherlock Holmes case. I say because I played Sherlock Holmes recently. Anyway, crazy development. So a lot of twists and turns. Fitz gets poisoned, and he just gets dropped off in the hay. Which, why? But whatever, I guess. Regal just had to feel the need to do his supervillain moment, I guess. Fucking hate Regal, by the way. Just want to say, Chivalry sounds like a fascinating character, and I'm a little bit sad we didn't get to see him as a character. Because based on Burridge's retelling, Chivalry is a fascinating character, but Burridge is definitely biased towards that. But anyway, Fitz is dying in the hay. Dog shows up. Dog that is mourning, and so Fitz automatically starts using his power with the dog. And then Burridge shows up. My man Burridge shows up again, and Burridge is like, stop that. And Fitz is like, I can't help it, I'm in pain. And Burridge is like, and Fitz like starts to get a little bit of power. I'm jumping a little bit here, but he starts to get a little bit of power, and the poison isn't quite killing him, and he's like, hold on, it's something along the lines of, why does he reveal that? Oh, how did you know to find me? Oh my god, how did you know to find me? He sighed, I just had a feeling. You heard nosy. Yes, the howling. That isn't what I meant. And then Burridge says, sensing a thing isn't the same as using a thing. Bitch. Dude fucking had the power all along. I don't know why that didn't occur to me. I just thought he was like superstitious or something. He has it. He knows what it is. I don't know if any of the other characters do. It's a mystery. I am so curious about it. I want to know more. I want to know more so bad. But Burridge was like, sensing it is the same as using it. And I was like, oh my god, he's had it all along. So that's crazy. Huge fan of that reveal. That reveal was beautiful. And then Fitz was like, are you going to help me or not? And Burridge was like, I don't know. And Fitz was like, well, I'm the same thing as you, a Kingsman, because Burridge asks what he is. And Fitz says, I'm a Kingsman, same thing as you, which also crazy reveal-ish. And so then, having realized that Burridge's job was to give strength to Chivalry, they tried to do the same thing, and I thought maybe it would work. No, it doesn't work. Robin Hobb is great at kind of breaking this thing that happens a lot in fantasy, where someone comes up with an idea and then it works and happens. Done. Not here. They're like, she builds up like the suspense of something working and then it doesn't work. She does that several times in this book, so it's fantastic. But in particular, they go in and freaking Burridge is like, use my strength, you'll be fine. And then it doesn't work out. And then they go up to Regal, and a fucking tall Giorda guy just fucking takes out Burridge. And I was like, no! No. And I had no hope. A cudgel to the brain, I had no hope. If there's a weapon that I immediately assume someone's dead, it's a cudgel. Those things are fucking brutal. They really are brutal. So he takes a cudgel to the head, which is crazy. And Regal's like doing his gloating, and he decides that he's going to fucking toss his poison ass into a hot tub. Crazy way to go. I mean, Regal's not particularly smart or clever, so it makes sense, but also what? I mean, it almost worked, but it didn't work. And you know why? One, Burridge was still breathing. Crazy. Two, when he was going incapacitated is when he's able to do the skill. When he dreams or when he's incapacitated is when he's capable of the skill. And so he skills to Verity while he's dying and gives his strength to Verity while he's dying, which is fucking crazy, and I legitimately for a while thought that maybe Fitz does die in this book. In the second book, it's a different character. I was not sure. Crazy behavior. Gives his strength to Verity. Verity's able to stop Galen, kills Galen, rightfully, just saying. Kills Galen, which is crazy as well. Reveals that Galen was a bastard, also crazy as hell. This end sequence was like crazy. Kills Galen, and then addresses Regal and is like, if you pull this shit again, I will know. And I was like, I'm a huge Verity fan. Please be Verity. Have Verity be the successor. Fuck Regal. Get him out of here. And then he addresses Fitz, and he's like, Fitz, stop. Go back to your body. He just, like, slams him out. I think he said being cuffed by a bear, which is an interesting phrase. And he gets slammed back into his body, and then it kind of fades. And then the next chapter starts, and it's not the epilogue, but it's the conclusion. It's the aftermath. That's the name of the chapter, I think. Aftermath. Yeah. It starts going through the aftermath of him recovering with Burrage, and the two of them are recovering, and they're kind of getting along, which is great. They're getting along again. Burrage is seemingly okay. Probably not. He probably has some mental problems, but it seems like Fitz has a lot more going on. I think Fitz might legitimately be disabled or something. He definitely went through it. He definitely has trauma of several sorts. Drowning trauma. They flat out referred to his nightmares about drowning. So he definitely has that. But I think his body might actually be a bit fucked up. We'll see. We'll see next book when they actually describe it more thoroughly. But they're recovering, and there's all these things, and there's Galen's death, and talking about Regal, and all the updates, and also address the marriage, and it seems like the marriage is going great, so that's great. Talked about the forged people, and then in the last paragraph, this is the part that matters. In the last paragraph here, I'm just gonna read it out loud because this fucking it hurt me. It really did. This is what made me start crying. Of one other I must speak, one dragged into that conflict and intrigue only by his loyalty to me. Diabolical start to this paragraph. As soon as I heard that, I was like, who's the other? Because this sounds very serious. To the end of my days, I will To the end of my days, I will bear the scars he gave me. His worn teeth sank deeply into my hands several times before he managed to drag me from that pool. How he did it, I will never know, but his head still rested on my chest when they found us. His mortal bonds to this world had been broken. Nosy was dead. I believe he gave his life freely, recalling that we were good to one another when we were puppies. Men cannot grieve as dogs do, but we grieve for many years. Oh my god. It just hit so hard because the word choice. I think that's what stood out to me, was the word choice that he used to explain that made it so meaningful to him as a character, and therefore to you as the reader. Deadly, diabolical. Especially the call out to the grieving line, which has been referenced 2 to 3 times throughout the book. There's a lot of themes on grieving, and bringing it back at the very end of the book, talking about how dogs grieve, and he related to it, and he grieved for a long time. Crazy. And then there's this fucking epilogue, which I don't know what is happening here. My best guess is that this is Chade. Listening to the audiobook, which by the way, I had both. I had the physical and the audio. I listened to the audio when I wanted to know like the tone people said things in, when I was unsure. I would have thought that this was like Verity or somebody. But or Burrage. But listening to the audiobook it sounded like Burrage. The words, it sounds like Chade. So I'm very confused who it is. Either it's Burrage in assassin mode, or it's Chade. I think it's more likely it's Chade because it talks about red ships, and I think Chade has something to do with that, which is a whole thing. But the very last line Somewhere a friend says softly, no. What does that mean? What does that mean? When I say this book is mysterious, I mean shit like that, where you're just like, that's probably a reread. Like, that's something you notice on a reread, but you have no fucking clue what it means right now. So, anyway, that is my synopsis of Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. Fucking love Burrich. The moral stories, I love Burrich. Chade was very entertaining. Particularly love Fitz and Chade's interactions together. But there's a lot of great moments there. I love the dogs and the other themes. Molly was kind of a side factor, but still interesting. He did almost kill that guy, too. That was crazy. But anyway, a lot of things in this book, I very much enjoyed it. I enjoy the characters. I think it's the character moments that really drive this forward for me. So I was a huge fan. Getting into what's new and what is next. As you can see, my bookshelf is gone because I started the moving process. These are all the books that remain, which is not a lot, but I did keep book 2 on hand just in case I did finish this book before I finish moving. So I will be reading Royal Assassin. I think this is Fitz on the cover, and if so, man has aged. Dude's a grown-ass adult. So this is very intriguing to see. So I'm curious to know if this is him or if this is Burrich. I don't know if Burrich would have an axe. I think an axe is very interesting on the cover because I don't think we've seen anyone use an axe so far. So, don't know what's going on there. There is a wolf in the background. There's a wolf in the background. I'm so curious. I'm so curious why there's a wolf in the background. So, I'm going to start this book. I'm very excited about it. I don't have any new books to show y'all right now, but I have new books in the mail where I will be arriving after I move. So after I move, I can do an update on how the books are doing. And then for what's next, I mean, after this, I'm probably going to do Assassin's Quest. I think that's a pretty safe bet. When I finish that, I will make the decision on if I'm doing all of the Realm of the Elderlings or if I'm going to move on to another series. I'll determine that after this is done. I do have a hold for This Is How You Win the Time War. I have a hold for that book because it's one of my sister's favorites and I want to honor the book she likes. So I have a hold on that book and I'll read that when I get it. Alright, I think that's it. I will see you all later. I will be graduating next week, which is crazy, life update level. I will be graduating next week, so I will be very busy, but I'm going to try to get most of this done before graduation if I can. We'll see. There's a lot of other things going on, but I want to read, so that's the hope. That's it. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.